Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague, Russell Berger. So this week we figure we're headed into a new year here. It's 2021, and kind of reflecting on last year and different trends that we saw. Obviously, most of the year we dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're taking a look at some of the trends in litigation that we're seeing. I'm actually going to share a little chart on the different types of litigation that we're seeing. So not surprising, Russell, I know that you and I aren't surprised by some of these trends that we're seeing in the types of cases, but in 2020, we saw a lot of terminations, unfortunately. And then we saw obviously the introduction of new laws, including the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So, we're seeing a lot of litigation around that. Also, a lot of disability ADA requests and things around COVID and people needing accommodations. So, not surprised in these trends and what we're seeing the most of. What do you think is ahead this year, Russell?
Yeah. So, obviously, maybe not so obviously, but during the better part of 2020, employment litigation was down. And that's because, the courts were down, a little bit like the rest of the world, lots of things were slowing down. However, employment issues were ever present and certainly, kept us as employment lawyers pretty busy. What I think we're starting to see now is, there have been a lot of terminations, unfortunately, resulting from the pandemic. And as we always have said, when the economy gets bad and employees get terminated, there's going to be litigation that follows that. And I don't think this is any different here. And certainly we're not out of the woods. I just saw a statistic that I think the unemployment numbers went up by 150,000 people last month. So it's not trending in the right direction currently. So I think we're going to see more termination issues, which I think then puts a premium on employers to have good termination process, because whatever your basis for termination is, when you terminate an employee, that's where your risk is the greatest. I mean, someone's just lost their job, they lost their source of income. They're more apt to sue you at that stage. So coming up with a process, taking the necessary steps to prepare for termination, I think that becomes all the more critical when we're in an environment where that risk is elevated.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we saw a lot of in 2020, and unfortunately, I think we'll still see in 2021. And I'll add to that too. I think that disability, accommodation requests and things like that are things we're going to continue to see as well. I know that we've seen some uptick in those types of cases and having to address that with our clients, because though we have a new year, COVID is still with us, and there's still some health concerns around that for people, and with different accommodations needed for potentially working remotely, in some of these considerations, especially with people that are starting to go back to work in person, which I think there'll be a lot more of this year, hopefully. People hopefully safe enough for people to go back to the office in a lot of circumstances, and so that will also bring some additional requests from employees, especially high-risk employees, different health concerns, things like that. So though the Families First Coronavirus Response Act technically partially expired, end of December, and is now voluntary for employers. So we're going to see a little bit less around that, I think. This year, we'll still be seeing a lot of COVID-19 related employment issues and exposure. So.
Yeah. So, with all that in mind, I think the advice is kind of along the lines of what we've been giving for the last 10 months, if not longer, which is, get your policies in place, make sure you're doing the right things. You're mitigating your risk in terms of COVID issues. And then, what we're seeing is, that general advice should be applied more broadly. Make sure you're taking the proper steps and procedures in advance of a termination. So, if someone's got performance issues, document it. Make sure you're creating your record. I know, Sarah, you and I have both dealt with this. Someone will say, I want to know what my risk is for terminating this person. They've been lousy for 6 months. And then we say, great, give us the performance reviews, give us the notes, give us the communications with the employee, and there's nothing. And so it's not just about knowing that the person has performed poorly, but documenting it. And frankly, from a management standpoint, both in terms of trying to improve the performance before you get to termination, as well as from the standpoint of insulating yourself against legal risk, is the employee should be being managed on these issues and should be informed about these issues, and that communication with the employee should be documented. Even if it's a conversation, the manager should go back and stick a note in the file or email themselves about what happened or email HR about what happened. We should be creating those records and that documentation, and also kind of adjusting the employee's expectations. If someone's performing poorly, you want them to perform better, you got to tell them about it. And I think the expression is that no one should ever be surprised that they're being terminated. And obviously, if you have an economic reason, you have to shut down a department or a branch or a group, that's a little bit different. But for performance reasons, if someone's a poor performer and they're getting terminated for that, and they're surprised it's coming, it's either, you as the employer have either done a lousy job of managing them, or the employee just, has got their head in the sand. But I think those are some really important reminders as you look at that chart and you see kind of where the risk is. It makes a lot of sense for employers to guard against that risk.
Yeah, and I would even add to that with everyone working remotely so much now, that's even more important. I think it's a little bit easier to just kind of slack on the documentation piece or on the management piece when sometimes you don't see people in person, or people aren't popping by each other's offices as much and things like that. And it's even more important to make sure that you're managing issues and documenting those issues and managing the performance issues, because we don't want employees saying, well, I've been working at home and no one's ever reached out to me about what's going on. I just thought I was just had my head down doing my job. So we don't want those types of circumstances, both from a productivity standpoint and for all the reasons mentioned. So I think it's even more important now than ever.
Definitely.
So, all right. Well, please join us next time, and hope you guys found this helpful. And we'll see you next time, Russell.